Welcome back, ladies. It's me again, Menopause Barbie, and I'm giving you tutorials on how to manage your menopause your way. But you know, there are just some things that you can't have your way. And one of them is the aging of your parents. Last week, we addressed the question of whether men and women trade places at menopause, and I presented a number of examples to suggest that we do. Well, today, we're going to talk about another social situation in which there is some trading of places between you and your elderly parents. Once again, you don't need the book or your outline notes for this. It's more of a practical nature. So, you know how we talked quite a bit about the fact that menopause exists simply because we're living longer? Well, we're not the only ones who are living longer. Our parents are too. Back in the 1900s, it was typical for both parents to die before their children ever reached the age of 50. But now, most people are living well beyond the age of 70. And that means there's a much greater likelihood that they'll live well beyond the time you become postmenopausal, which puts adult children in the position of parenting their parents. And because women are having children later in life, you're likely to have both elderly parents and youngest children to care for at the same time. You've heard me refer to this as the sandwich generation, right? You know, that's when you are sandwiched between two other generations, both of whom are leaning on you for support. So, here's a piece of sandwich bread. Dad and Mom. So, you put your parents on the sandwich. And here's you. Another piece of bread. Just building the sandwich. Oh, and then you probably have your children. More bread. And let's pile on the kids. So, actually, you might even have grandchildren who depend on you too. And if that's the case, you've got an even thicker sandwich. Yep, put on the grandkids too. Oh my. But, you know, wait a minute. This isn't unique to women, right? I mean, adult men have elderly parents too. So why don't we refer to men as the sandwich generation? Well, you know what? That's because there's a gender bias in terms of who cares for aging parents. And our society thinks of women as the caregivers. And most of the responsibility for elderly care falls on the shoulders of women. So let's put that into perspective too. In addition to having parents and children to care for, you might also have a husband who vies for your attention, right? Gotta pile him on there also, right? This sandwich is getting to where it can hardly be balanced. And what if you have a job and you got a boss and you have to satisfy him? Add to it the boss. I mean, look at this sandwich we've created. So you end up with quite a thick sandwich, multiple layers of people who are pressing on you for support, who are causing you to make sure you satisfy them. That's a big job, don't you think? But what about siblings? I mean, you might have siblings. I mean, even with smaller families these days, often they're siblings, right? So yeah, what about these guys? Well, if there's more than one child, why not share the responsibility? You know, in a perfect world, all the responsibility would be divided evenly, and every family member including your kids, would do his or her part. But you know what? We don't live in a perfect world. And one of the most imperfect things about our world is our family dynamics. I mean, families are all dysfunctional, screwed up, fraught with interpersonal conflicts between different personalities and such. And so the cold, hard reality of this is that the burden of caring generally falls primarily on one sibling. And usually, it's the eldest female. That might be you. So if you add all this to the symptoms of menopause, you have a great big pile of stress. And needless to say, this can worsen both your family dynamics and your symptoms of menopause. So I'm here to help you with your menopause. I'm going to offer some suggestions so that as to how you can manage your elderly parents in the midst of your menopause. So if you're fortunate enough to be watching this video before you find yourself in this quandary of taking care of younger children and older parents all at the same time, please plan ahead. So here's how you do that. Sit down with your entire family when your parents are still spry, spunky, and able to care for themselves. Have your parents tell you their preferences. You know, most parents don't want to upend their children's lives. Most of them want to do whatever they can to remain independent. They don't want to become your child. And despite the fact that they may think that you're a great parent to your own children, they don't want you parenting them. And there are many ways to put things in order so that when they need help, they have it on their own terms. You know, one of the most beneficial things you can get your parents to buy is long-term care insurance. So this is a policy that provides a caregiver for your parent when they need one. Or maybe you can buy it for them. And there are many different types of policies, but the idea is to have in-home or institutional care when the need arises. And that caregiver from long-term care insurance would provide all the hands-on services that you would have to provide yourself if you didn't have them. So it might be personal hygiene or nursing care or physical rehabilitation or oversight for safety, anything. In fact, you should buy this for yourself now. Do it for your children so that you're not a burden to them in a few decades. Okay, so next in that family meeting, discuss the responsibilities of each family member. You know, the sibling with the most financial means can contribute financially. The sibling who doesn't go to work can maybe run errands and do things that provides hands-on care. The sibling who's, let's say, most organized can manage finances. I mean, you know, your family members, whatever, whoever does what the best, let them do it, because that's really the name of the game. So this is your diverse family we're talking about here, okay? Everyone has different strengths, and everyone can contribute in some way that is most consistent with his or her own situation. On average, it takes about 20 hours per week to provide elderly care. So there's no reason that the entire burden has to be on one person. And if one person does have to do all of that alone, it usually just breeds more animosity and family dysfunction. So there's a huge financial impact to caring for a parent. I mean, think about it. I mean, you're already busy raising your own kids, right? You got all these kids, and you got to send them to college. But in addition to that, you're planning for your own retirement. And you're gonna live a lot longer than you might have ever anticipated. So you either need to retire later or save more. You're gonna live a long, fruitful life. Like her. She says, still love to have a good roll in the hay. You never know. And you probably didn't factor in the need to take care of your parents or to pay their medical bills, right? You might have to interrupt your own employment in order to care for a parent, and that will set you back even further. So If you had to take on caregiving as a part-time or full-time job, you'd be what some people call an informal caregiver. And what that means is that you don't get paid for all the care you're giving. Can you believe that if people did get paid for their informal caregiving, it would amount to $522 billion annually? I mean, isn't that number staggering? And, think about how all this makes your parents feel. I mean, they don't want to go from being the strong authority figures they once were to being your child. I mean, think about how demeaning that is to them. So no matter how you view it, the situation is an overwhelming one for every single family member. So let's list some of the things you should address as you navigate all these dynamics. The first thing to take into consideration is your parent's health status. Helping a healthy parent is a far cry different than helping an ill parent. If your parent is ill, it's critical to accept the fact that you may not be able to care for your parent, whether you want to or not. I mean, it may be detrimental for your parent, for you to care for their physical needs. For example, if your parent has Alzheimer's disease, you probably have no business trying to take care of him or her in your home. I mean, there are just too many pitfalls and risks. They need a professional. But, children often feel guilty if they don't take care of the parent themselves. Well, you know what? Sometimes it just isn't about you. Get over yourself and get over your guilt and just do what's best for your parent. If your parent has a mental deterioration or a physical handicap that requires professional caregiving or a professional setting, then please opt for that. So, what if your parent is in good health, yet unable to live all alone for other reasons? What should you do in that situation? Well, there are a variety of options for you. In the best case scenario, your parent is independent, but still in need of readily available help. And see, that help can be friends as well as family. The goal is for your elderly parent to have a community. And this type of arrangement is least disruptive to both your life and your parents' life. Do you remember that television show called The Golden Girls? See, I thought that was one of the most enlightening shows on television. It consisted of 4 elderly women who all lived together. And it was a comedy, but the underlying message, for me anyway, was that these women had both independence and each other. And so instead of moving in with their kids, they moved in with each other. And it was kind of like a senior sorority. I mean, how do you think it feels to the elderly person to have to uproot their entire life and go live in a house with a bunch of their dysfunctional family members? I mean, if it were you, wouldn't you prefer to live with your friends of a similar age? I mean, do you think it's easy to put yourself into someone else's home and into their life and in their rhythm? I mean, even if it is your own child. So unless you've already lived with these same people in the same dwelling all your adult life, moving in together suddenly after many decades apart can be really awkward for everyone. Even your own kids may find it odd to have their grandparents living in the same house. It might change things quite a bit. What about your husband? Do you think having your parents around might affect your relationship with your husband or affect your sex life? So face it, family dynamics change with each and every family member you add to the mix. Now, it could make your life much better to have your parent living in the house with you. But you have to assess that on a family by family basis because it's not the same for each person. So maybe there's a way for your elderly parent to live with other elderly parents, all of whom can help the other in some way. It's kind of a form of camaraderie with people of a similar age, kind of like the Golden Girls family. Or maybe your parent wants more privacy than is possible living in a single dwelling with other people. Maybe there's an apartment for seniors that would work. These places usually have all sorts of social events going on all the time, and most of them are very affordable. because they're based on income. And they're in the business of making it possible for elderly people to live within the limits of, let's say, their Social Security income. Let's see, the next step up from that would be, say, something like assisted living. Now, assisted living facilities span a very wide range, both in terms of services and price, but they're the best of both independence and professional help. Another option is to have your elderly parent live close to you, but not with you. I mean, you could move a few houses away from them, or they could move across the street from you. That makes me think of that show called Everybody Loves Raymond. You know, in that show, his parents live right across the street. They're really dysfunctional. Hope your family's not that dysfunctional. And I have a girlfriend at the gym who just bought a condominium in a high-rise right down the hall from her elderly father. She needs to be close to him, but she needs to be a few feet away from him, not a few steps away from him. And even with one of these semi-independent living situations, you have to consider which sibling is the best for overseeing your parent. And of course, there are some practical aspects to this as well as some social ones. You know, depending on the circumstances, you need to consider, which sibling is financially equipped to help. Which one lives the closest to your parent? Which one gets along best with your parents? You never know. I think we all think that our parents have one favorite kid. You might need to think about that when it comes to which child is going to have the most interaction with them. But I care about you. You know how I'm always telling you that it's all about you? And I have emphasized the fact that women are the worst at taking time for themselves. And previously I've told you that with regard to just your husband and your kids. Well, how do you think caring for an elderly parent factors into all that? If you answered that it puts you in a state of even more self-neglect, you would probably be correct. This is the height of stress for women in our age group. So I'm begging you, please, please carve out some selfish time. Don't neglect your health. Don't neglect your menopause management. And they may be one and the same. Give this whole phenomenon of becoming your parent's parent some thought. Don't wait for a crisis. Plan ahead. Isn't that the same thing I'm trying to teach you to do for your menopause? Plan ahead. For those of you already in the throes of this very difficult time, my heart goes out to you. I hope you'll reach out to me to make things better with your menopause. And that can make everything better all around. And with my sandwich super high now, I'll bid you goodbye for today. Until next time, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go to my website, see all the goodies. Come to a seminar. See you in a week. Bye.